Hold up, Cowboys Nation, because what just dropped is absolutely insane. And if you're not subscribed to this channel right now, you need to hit that button immediately, because we've got breaking news that's going to change everything you thought you knew about the Dallas Cowboys offensive line heading into the season. Brian Schottenheimer just made a massive announcement during OTAs that has sent shockwaves through the entire organization, and I'm about to break down exactly what this means for the future of this team's offensive line. We're talking about position battles, we're talking about jobs on the line, and we're talking about one player who just got put on notice in a major way. This is either the best news you've heard all offseason, or it's about to make you extremely nervous, depending on which player you've been banking on. So smash that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and buckle up, because this video is absolutely loaded with insider information, statistical breakdowns, and analysis that's going to blow your mind. I guarantee by the end of this video, you're going to have a completely different perspective on what this Cowboys offensive line is going to look like when they take the field. Let's dive into this breaking news from OTAs that has everyone talking and nobody saw coming. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Cowboys Digest. I genuinely hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day wherever you might be watching this video from, because we've got some incredibly fun and interesting news to bring to you as OTAs are winding down here at the end of the first week. We got an absolutely fascinating comment from offensive coordinator Brian Schottenheimer during his media availability that has massive implications for this offensive line and honestly, for the entire offensive identity of this football team. This isn't just some throwaway comment during a routine press conference. This is a legitimate statement that reveals exactly what the coaching staff is thinking and what their priorities are as they construct this roster heading into training camp and eventually to regular season. So let's get right into it, because this information is too important to dance around, and I want to make sure everyone fully understands what's happening here and why it matters so much. Todd Archer, who covers the Cowboys, was the first one to report this, and his exact words are critically important to understanding the full context of what's going on. He said that Brian Schottenheimer stated there's a competition at left tackle between Tyler Guyton and Nate Thomas. Now, that alone is newsworthy, but here's where it gets really interesting. Schottenheimer went on to say that he likes what Guyton has done so far during these OTA sessions, but, and this is a direct quote, "We're going to make Tyler earn it." That specific phrasing tells you absolutely everything you need to know about how the coaching staff is approaching this situation and what their expectations are for their investment at the left tackle position. Now, there's a couple of different layers to break down from this statement, and we're going to go through each one methodically, because the implications extend far beyond just a simple position battle between two players. Let's start with what I would absolutely consider to be the good news in this situation, and honestly, what I think most Cowboys fans should be relieved to hear. There was extensive discussion throughout the offseason about what exactly was going to happen with Tyler Guyton, and whether or not Tyler Smith might actually move over to that left tackle position to stabilize what some people perceived as a weakness. If you remember correctly, they experimented with that configuration last season. The coaching staff seemed to like what they saw, and there was legitimate speculation that maybe they would continue with that arrangement moving forward into this season. We now know definitively, based on these comments from Brian Schottenheimer, that scenario is absolutely not going to be the case. It is going to be Tyler Guyton's job to win, and he is clearly positioned as the favorite to secure that starting left tackle spot. You can see from that quote directly from Todd Archer that Guyton is the guy who is expected to win this battle when everything shakes out. However, and this is the critical part, it's a legitimate battle nonetheless, and it's absolutely something that I think people should be watching closely as we progress through the offseason program. Both of the tackle positions are worth monitoring closely right now. Not just Tyler Guyton at left tackle, but also Terrence Steele over at right tackle, because that position was recently labeled by ESPN as the worst move the Dallas Cowboys didn't make this offseason, which was essentially letting him go or upgrading that spot. Before we go any further, I want to talk to you guys about something that's been a complete game changer for me personally, and I think it could help a lot of you watching this video right now. Fellas, if you've been feeling more sluggish lately, if your workouts feel harder than they used to, or if recovery is taking way longer than it should be, I'm here to tell you that it might not just be your busy schedule that's the problem. You see, most men start naturally losing testosterone at the age of 30, and that decline continues as you get older. That is exactly where Marsman comes in, and why I'm excited to tell you about it. Marsman is specifically designed to help free up usable testosterone naturally without any synthetic nonsense or questionable ingredients. It's made with 8 clinically dosed ingredients, including zinc, boron, vitamin D, and several others to support energy levels, strength gains, stamina throughout the day, and faster recovery after workouts. But the number one reason that I personally take Marsman is for focus and mental clarity, which has been absolutely incredible. It's third-party tested, so you know exactly what you're getting. It's backed by a 90-day money-back guarantee, so there's literally no risk, and you can even get it conveniently on Amazon. For a limited time, our listeners can get 50% off for life, plus free shipping, and 3 free gifts with your order. Yes, you heard that correctly. 50% off for life, which is an insane deal. Go to mango.com, that's mengo.com, for 50% off and 3 free gifts when you check out. It's also available on Amazon, if that's more convenient for you. Now, after you purchase, they're going to ask where you heard about them, so please support our show and tell them that we sent you. We'll have their link in the description box below, so make sure you check it out. Now, there's going to be extensive discussion across both of these tackle positions for multiple different reasons, and this announcement from Schottenheimer is just one element of that larger conversation. But I do think it's an incredibly interesting situation to digest and analyze, because it reveals so much about the organizational philosophy. I want to break down what exactly this competition might look like in practical terms, and what the realistic expectations should be. Because Brian Schottenheimer mentioned that Guyton is the favorite, but I don't know if that statement fully details how big of a deal this actually is for Guyton to make sure that he definitively wins this competition, and why he really should be expected to do so, based on talent and investment. Let's start first with some perspective and context here from RJ Ochoa over at Blogging the Boys, because I think he made an interesting point that's really important to bring up when we're evaluating Tyler Guyton's performance. And I think he made an interesting point that's really important to bring up when we're evaluating Tyler Guyton's performance. The expectation and standard for offensive linemen in Dallas has been set enormously high over the past decade plus, with legendary players like Tyron Smith, who was a perennial All-Pro, Travis Frederick, who was one of the best centers in football before his career was cut short, and Zach Martin, who's a future Hall of Famer. Those are the guys who set the standard for what offensive line play looks like in Dallas. Tyler Smith has lived up to that incredibly high standard through his first couple of seasons, and has established himself as an elite young guard. But through 2 seasons, Tyler Guyton has struggled, relatively speaking, when you compare his performance to that established standard of excellence. Now, I want to be fair here, because comparing anyone to Hall of Fame level players isn't necessarily reasonable, but when you're a high draft pick for the Dallas Cowboys, that's the expectation, whether it's fair or not. When we look at his PFF grade from last year, the underlying statistics, which I genuinely believe matter most when evaluating offensive linemen, paint a picture that honestly wasn't great. He posted a 57.5 overall grade that ranked him 71st out of 89 qualified tackles across the entire league. His pass blocking grade was even worse, at 50 overall, which ranked him 81st out of those 89 tackles. That's really concerning when you consider how critical pass protection is, especially for a left tackle, who's supposed to be protecting the quarterback's blind side. However, there was a bright spot in that he did perform reasonably well in run blocking, finishing 48th out of 89 tackles, with a 64.9 grade in that specific area. Now, given the draft capital that was invested in him, given the Cowboys' organizational need and desire to have elite tackle play on both sides, and given the standard that's been established, these numbers aren't as good as you would want them to be or expect them to be at this stage of his development. But here's the critical question we need to ask. Is Nate Thomas actually a legitimate threat to win this starting job? He played a decent amount last year when called upon, but when you really dive deep into the statistics, they don't exactly support the narrative that he performed well to really any significant extent. Now, I just showed you how the numbers didn't look particularly good for Tyler Guyton and his PFF statistics, so you might think it couldn't possibly be much worse for the alternative option. Well, unfortunately, you would be completely wrong about that assumption. Nate Thomas posted a brutal 39.2 overall grade on his PFF evaluation, and that ranked him 88th out of 89 qualified tackles. His pass blocking grade was even more concerning at 31.6, which ranked him dead last at 89th, literally the worst amongst any qualified tackle in the entire league. He was 77th out of 89 in run blocking grade, with a 52.9. He allowed 3 sacks, which was middle of the pack, and he only played about 342 total snaps, while accumulating just 4 penalties. For comparison, Guyton allowed only 2 sacks and played significantly more snaps overall. So here's the fundamental question. Should Nate Thomas realistically win this battle based on performance and statistical production? Absolutely not. There's no objective argument that supports that outcome. So why did Brian Schottenheimer come out publicly and announce that they're making this a legitimate competition? The answer is actually pretty simple when you think about the psychology and motivation tactics that coaches use. This is designed to light a fire under Tyler Guyton and send him a very clear message to pull up his big boy pants and start acting like your job is genuinely on the line. Now, I don't necessarily think there's actually serious concern in the minds of the Dallas Cowboys coaching staff that Guyton's job is truly in jeopardy. I think that they're not as worried about Guyton's long-term development as maybe the fan base, those of us in the media, or even some of the insider analysts really realize or appreciate. But that doesn't mean that a strategic kick in the pants with a message of, hey, your job is not automatically guaranteed, can't help light a fire and elevate his performance. For a guy who was a relatively high draft selection just a couple of years ago, a guy who played at Oklahoma, which is obviously a top-tier college program with elite-level competition, you've got to come out here and compete at the highest level and prove yourself every single day. Maybe with Brian Schottenheimer, and I genuinely think he's an excellent coach with strong leadership qualities, maybe he recognizes something specific here. Maybe there's been a little bit of fire or competitive edge lost in Guyton over the past year when Tyler Smith took over a prominent role and played exceptionally well. Maybe this public declaration of competition is strategically designed to reignite that flame, to get him back in the saddle mentally, and to push him to reach his full potential. Sometimes the best motivation for a young player is the fear of losing something they thought was guaranteed. The tackle positions as a whole are absolutely something that I want to watch closely throughout the entire offseason program, because Terrence Steele at right tackle is also not necessarily safe in that starting role moving forward. Now, that's not something that has been officially confirmed by Schottenheimer or even directly mentioned in any press conferences, but the writing is on the wall when you pay attention. I really like Drew Shelton as a prospect, and I think that he's actually a pretty legitimate potential candidate to push for significant playing time at that right tackle spot. It's worth noting that there were multiple players added to the offensive line during the offseason, and there are some interesting possibilities emerging from that group. Obviously, Drew Shelton was a draft pick this past year for the Dallas Cowboys in the 4th round, and he can definitely come in and potentially make a serious push for that right tackle spot if he develops quickly. Now, does that mean it's going to happen right away in week 1? I don't necessarily think that's the most realistic scenario, or the truth of the situation, but I absolutely do think that's something worth noting and monitoring as camp progresses. Asim Richards is also a guy that I think can be a solid rotational piece and provide quality depth, but there are just several names on this depth chart across the offensive line that I genuinely want to see compete and fight for positions, and that definitely includes Tyler Guyton. I am genuinely excited to see what exactly we're going to get out of this battle, because it's going to play out over an extended period of time. We're going to have plenty of opportunities to evaluate both players, because we just got through the first week of OTAs, we'll have the mandatory minicamp coming up, which I believe is scheduled for June 16th or 18th. A lot of NFL franchises are either pushing back their mandatory minicamps or outright canceling them if they had perfect attendance at their voluntary workout programs. The Cowboys don't have perfect attendance, so that cancellation probably is not going to happen for them. But just as an additional note, they'll also have training camp starting on July 22nd as well, which is when the real competition and evaluation truly begins. So we'll definitely see what happens with this Tyler Guyton and Nate Thomas situation as it develops. I think this is Guyton's battle to lose based on everything we know right now, but there are definitely some interesting dynamics to monitor coming out of OTAs as well. Nick Harris, who does excellent coverage, had lots of additional information and observations from the practice sessions. Go check out his Twitter account because he has a tremendous amount of good insight and detailed information on the entire OTA process that you won't find anywhere else. I'll let you pause the video if you want and read through some of those observations. I'm not going to read every single detail to you because you've probably already seen most of it anyway if you follow Cowboys news closely. I really just wanted to focus specifically on discussing this Tyler Guyton and Nate Thomas battle because I think it has major implications for the offense. But let me know what you think down in the comments section, because I genuinely want to hear from Cowboys Nation on this. Who do you think will ultimately win this starting job when everything shakes out? Do you really believe that this public announcement was primarily designed to light a fire under Guyton? Or do you genuinely think that the starting job is actually legitimately on the line, and there's real concern about his performance? I think it could potentially be a situation where the job is somewhat on the line, but I personally lean toward the interpretation that this is primarily about lighting a fire under a young player, and pushing him to reach his ceiling. We'll have to wait and see how it all develops throughout the summer. I really appreciate you watching this video and taking the time to stay informed on the latest Dallas Cowboys news. Make sure you hit that subscribe button to stay updated with all the latest and greatest coverage on America's team. We'll see you in the next video, where we break down even more critical information you need to know. Until then, how about them Cowboys?